On my trips to Egypt over the years, I've loved exploring the art, architecture, and cultural heritage of this mysterious land. We always began in Saqqara, the necropolis for Memphis, Egypt's old capital, with buildings and tombs that have survived thousands of years, dating back to 3150 BC. It has the world's oldest completely stone building complex and still in good condition. After walking through the south court and roofed colonnade, we saw the first and oldest pyramid, called the Stepped Pyramid of Zoser, soaring over 200 feet. It was built in 2600 BC like a layer cake of mastabas. Our next stop was across the Nile tributary, Memphis, the site of the oldest unified kingdom under King Menes, and several great monuments to Ramses II, including a sphinx and several upright statues. In a recently built pavilion, it was fun to walk around the giant 32-foot-long fallen colossus of Ramses and enjoy the artistry of this detailed sculpture and related stone monuments known as stela. They explain the greatness of this pharaoh who reigned for 66 years. He was the third and mightiest king of the 19th dynasty, known as Egypt's Golden Age. And then off to Giza, in the Great Sahara Desert next to Cairo. Here I marveled at the Great Sphinx, bearing the likeness of the pharaoh Khafre. It is 66 feet tall and 240 feet long and greets the morning sun each day facing the east.
We're in Giza, Egypt, just outside Cairo, beginning of the Great Sahara Desert. And behind me are the three Great Pyramids. The Great Pyramid by Cheops on your left, the tallest and biggest of all three, 4th dynasty in the Old Kingdom. In the middle, of course, is Khafre or Khephren. To the right, Menkaure. Amazing pharaohs. These were their tombs for the afterlife.
I was lucky on 2 occasions to get up close and personal with the pyramids, including the Great Pyramid, over 700 feet wide at the base and nearly 500 feet tall. We even went inside the pyramid and crawled up into the actual burial chamber of the pharaoh. This time the Great Pyramid of Cheops. The last time we entered the Pyramid of Khafre. But during this trip, we also saw the spectacular light and sound show on the pyramids at night. And now we're off to the Papyrus Institute to learn how early Egyptians made a paper-like canvas from papyrus reeds that grow near the Nile. The curator demonstrated how a reed is first cut, and then sliced, and also woven together, and then dried by rolling and pounding to make a perfect canvas for writing or for art. And during our shopping time at Cairo's Outdoor Market and Grand Bazaar, we saw many works of art, including newly created papyrus art.
This way, best way. How are you?
India. I'm not really a big
And for ancient art and artifacts, we toured the famous Egyptian Museum of Cairo, which houses 120,000 artifacts. Now, not all are on display, but we saw many of them. Here we saw, for example, the death masks of the pharaohs, the painted limestone statues of Prince Rehotep and his wife Nofret of the 4th dynasty, the squatting scribe of the 4th dynasty with inlaid quartz eyes framed in bronze, the sycamore statue of the high priest Ka-Aper of the 5th dynasty, also with quartz eyes, and the Narmer palette dating back to 3100 BC. It contains some of the earliest hieroglyphic inscriptions ever discovered. We also saw the Benirpta stela that speaks of Israel being desolate, perhaps during its own captivity in Egypt. We saw many other stela as well, which are stone slabs with engraved words or art. And of course, artifacts discovered in King Tut's tomb by Howard Carter in 1922 at the Valley of the Kings, along with other buried treasures and mummies. The mummy of King Tut is still in his tomb, and we'll see that later, but here is the likeness of King Tut's head and many of the items discovered by Howard Carter so well preserved. It took Howard Carter 6 years of hard work before discovering these items in the Valley of the Kings at Thebes. When making a mummy, specialists would first extract the brain through the nostrils using a hooked tool. The cavity was then filled with liquid bitumen. The eyes were then removed and replaced with porcelain. Next, they took out the internal organs, which they preserved in canopic jars, to be placed either in or near the coffin. These cavities were filled with myrrh or perfumed sawdust and left to dry for 70 days, and finally, the body and limbs were wrapped in linen and resin. Colleague Carolyn Johnson gave an artist's point of view on many of these artifacts. And then that night, we relaxed to cultural dance and song on the Nile. Taking a bus to Alexandria, we saw the site of the world-famous library and the Pharos Lighthouse that stood here in the days of Cleopatra. Here was the base of the lighthouse that soared nearly 400 feet and shone its light for 30 miles. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. We walked on the streets of ancient Alexandria, where Cleopatra and Mark Antony once walked, and saw ruins of temples, monuments, theaters, and shops. Alexandria was founded by Alexander the Great as the new center of Hellenism and the Greek world. It soon also became a center of Jewish scholarship and Christianity. The Greek Septuagint was produced here. And subterranean daughter libraries housed hundreds of scrolls and hieroglyphics right next to the underground Serapeum, or underground temple to the god Serapis. These tunnels were dug in 230 BC. This city was home to all the Ptolemies, as well as Athanasius, Philo, and Origen. We also saw Christian catacombs dating back to the 2nd to the 4th centuries AD. They are called the Kom el Shokafa and were among the wonders of the Middle Ages. Tunneling through solid bedrock at 100 feet below the ground, they were in fact places for Christian burial and worship during persecution. Here also is where Cleopatra and Mark Antony died, and I'm standing next to a large bust of Mark Antony. On our journey southward along the Nile, we stopped at Luxor Temple, a large ancient Egyptian temple complex located on the east bank of the Nile River in the city of ancient Thebes, today known as Luxor. It was built around 1400 BC by Amenhotep II, Amenhotep III, and Tutankhamun. In Luxor, there are several great temples on the east and west banks. This one is called the Southern Sanctuary. My son Jared and I saw colorful symbols on the ruins which show how this structure was converted to a Christian church in the 4th century and a mosque in the 7th century, serving as a place of worship for over 2 millennia. And the nearby Karnak Temple is an ancient complex of temples, chapels, pylons, connected to the Luxor temple by a 1.5 mile long avenue of sphinxes. It was called the Sacred Place, and was the main place of worship for the 18th dynasty, who honored Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. After a lovely sail across the Blue Nile, we made our way to the giant colossi at Memnon that once led to the temple of Amun-Ophis that has since been destroyed by earthquakes. These giants are 66 feet tall. We then came to the grandiose funerary temple of Queen Hatshepsut, who was the daughter of Thutmose I and became the wife of Thutmose II when she was 20 years old. When Thutmose II died, Hatshepsut became regent and had herself crowned Pharaoh of Egypt. The people viewed her as deity. Some religious scholars like William Sanford Lasore believe she was the one who found Moses in the bulrushes, and the pharaohs of her family were the pharaohs of the Exodus. Just a bit further in the Valley of the Kings, we saw the amazing underground tombs of the pharaohs, where for a period of 5 centuries, from the 16th to 10th centuries BC, rock-cut tombs were excavated for the pharaohs and powerful nobles of the New Kingdom in the 18th to 20th dynasties of ancient Egypt. We were amazed by the elegant beauty as we descended into one tomb after another. And then we came to the tomb of King Tutankhamun, King Tut, and saw his actual mummy, and looked on his face just as Howard Carter did back in 1922. After a 4-hour bus ride south from Luxor along the Nile, we came to Aswan Dam and Lake Nasser for a short cruise to the magnificent Philae Temple. Philae is an island, and this entire complex was dismantled and moved here as part of the UNESCO Nubia project.
For now, if we need any something from the synagogue, you go to the mosque, you go to the church, you keep this offering, everything, you keep the thing candle, and things that to be something. So they believe about that. The offering is very, very important.
Our journey took us to 2 more ancient temples, the Temple of Kam Ombo, dedicated to Horus and Sobek, the crocodile god, and the Temple of Horus at Edfu. It's fitting that we end our time here, as it's one of the most recent temples built during the days of the Ptolemies between 237 and 57 BC. The god Horus was also identified as the Greek god Apollo, the god of light and humanities. The inscriptions on its walls provide important information on language, myth, and religion during the Hellenistic era in Egypt, and done so in great artistry. What a fitting conclusion for our exploration of Egypt.